Well, the World Economic Forum is pushing for more censorship worldwide, and they are getting it. They're getting it at the hands of the Trudeau government. Justin Trudeau, of course, a protege of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, lied right to our faces once again. I know it's hard to imagine that Justin Trudeau would lie to us. They told all of us that their new censorship plan in Canada would only target large social media companies. Well, now we know that that's not true, that the Trudeau government is now demanding that independent news media and podcasters register to be regulated with the state. As journalist Michael Schellenberger reports, the Trudeau simultaneously demands crackdown on independent news and podcasting. And of course, this is all part of this World Economic Forum plan. But it gets worse. As David Clayton, independent journalist and writer at the Post Millennial, joins us from Canada to talk about, David, so it's not just the online safety piece of this. It's not just the registration of the podcasters and the media, but there's a whole other, even more nefarious piece of this. Can you break it all down for us?
Yeah, it's quite fascinating because I went through everything the CRTC is pushing out yesterday because I wanted to be accurate and complete and to actually know what they are saying. There's a lot of things being said out on social media. A lot of journalists are very upset. But here's what it comes down to. The CRTC is creating a registry, an online media registry. And that, for a lot of Canadians, reminds us of that gun registry that the Liberals created that was so controversial and was actually ended under Stephen Harper. Trudeau's back again at that. But what's going on with this online registration is that the CRTC is suggesting that it won't affect you if you're not making $10 million or more. However, you've got to read the fine print. And the fine print definitely says that this is a comprehensive online news registry. And under the Broadcast Act, the CRTC can change that stipulation anytime it wants. It can decide, it can decide tomorrow that 10 million is not the threshold, that it might be $1. You could be losing money and you're still going to have to be on the registry. So I have come to the definite conclusion that this $10 million threshold that they are putting out there in the second paragraph of their news release is all a facade. It's camouflage because you read the fine print in what the CRTC is saying. And by the way, that's the equivalent of the FCC in Canada. It clearly states that they are after a comprehensive online news registry. And as you mentioned, that's not the end of it, because Trudeau has a three-pronged approach to internet censorship. And like the UK, like Australia, New Zealand, and other so-called democratic countries, he's coming out with the Online Safety Act, in addition to this Online Streaming Act, which will effectively outlaw disinformation. And that disinformation is not defined in the bill. I have read all of the study group conversation, and they clearly state and stipulate that we will not define what disinformation is because that will make it more difficult to enforce the bill. We'll be forced to prove it's disinformation. They actually say that in print. And I have written about this extensively. That it's an outrage. They're admitting they can't define disinformation. So they say, let's not define it. And it's going to mean whatever the Trudeau government decides it means. And as you reported last week, this is already happening in Great Britain.
Right. So this is happening in Great Britain. I want to circle back on this disinformation piece, because what recourse then do court systems have? I mean, what recourse does a podcaster or a journalist have to fight this? I mean, they're going to have to spend a lot of money defending themselves. The government will come in, they will level like an attack on a particular journalist or a podcaster or whatever, and they'll call it disinformation. It could end their channel. It could wipe them off of social media, whatever it happens to be, and then they're out. And, you know, you and I both know journalists are not exactly Scrooge McDuck swimming in giant vats of gold coins, right? It's not an incredibly lucrative business, you know, unless I guess you're some large corporation like a Murdoch-run corporation. So they don't have the money to defend themselves. And they're going to go up and say, well, this is not disinformation, But of course, it's the amount of money they'll spend on lawyers to try to defend themselves against something that they can't even define.
Well, there's a history of this in Canada already, and it's called the Human Rights Tribunals that have effectively choked free speech for years. And what happens is you can be hauled before a human rights tribunal for offending somebody based on whatever the criteria happens to be by that offended individual. And you end up spending a lot of money in court. It's not even a criminal offense, but you end up spending, as you say, a lot of money you don't have defending yourself. So what's going to happen with this online safety bill? Clearly, this could be a criminal offense that could amount to jail time. We're going to start incarcerating journalists for writing, talking, broadcasting, televising disinformation, which will not be defined. This is a frightening concept because if I want to suggest that Ukraine is losing the war with Russia, the Trudeau government will surely label that as disinformation because Justin Trudeau honestly believes Ukraine is going to win this war. And there's no way they can lose this war. And if I say otherwise, well, that's clearly disinformation.
Right.
And as the UK is saying, that they've introduced a third term into this, malinformation, which means if I offend somebody by talking the truth, speaking the truth, I'm still liable. So it is absolutely outrageous. It is a radical departure from the free speech traditions that Canada, the US, the UK, and all democratic countries that trace their lineage back to the Magna Carta believe in or have believed in. And Justin Trudeau is rapidly tearing up free speech in this country.
Well, he is maybe arguably the biggest purveyor of disinformation in Canada. We saw during the trucker convoy labeling just white supremacists, extremists. The list was endless. Anti-Semites. I mean, the list was endless of what disinformation was put out there. So I guess if you're a journalist and you reported on the fake information and you uncovered that they're not white supremacists, that's not exactly who was in the trucker convoy, you're basically an enemy of the state, which is exactly what happened in the UK. You mentioned Britain, and last week we reported here on Redacted about a UK journalist who was live streaming at the time and was reporting on the war in Ukraine and some other things when basically got a knock at the door from the British government and was arrested. And so that's really what could happen here. I know it sounds like, oh, that's just something that happened in the UK. No, the exact same thing is now coming to Canada. Can you explain that piece of it?
Well, that's part of Trudeau's Online Safety Act, and it's called the same thing as the UK has chosen to call it. I haven't yet to see the term malinformation being used in Canada, but give it time. And as you say, Justin Trudeau is an expert at one thing. He's incompetent at just about everything he tries, but he's an expert at one thing, and that's projecting his own faults on other people and projecting his own authoritarianism on other people. So when he talks about all of these nefarious journalists out there producing disinformation, misinformation, Russian propaganda, all he's doing is admitting that that's all he ever does is produce disinformation. And that's all he can talk about is material like that. But if we think it's bad with this online streaming act, that online news registry is a very bad thing, certainly this idea that we can be potentially locked up or fined, it doesn't really matter because the essence of this act will be to destroy independent journalists. That is Trudeau's aim. And this is a much more frightening concept than even an online news registry because it means effectively that Trudeau can shut down whomever he wants at a whim based on a law that can't even define disinformation. So this is where Canada sits, and I'm sure Joe Biden is watching this very closely, and every other democratic nation is going in this direction. And as you said, why? Why are they all doing this at the same time? They literally are at the same time. Perhaps it has something to do with a global wish to do so coming from the WEF. Some people might call that conspiratorial, but it looks pretty obvious to me.
Well, it all comes at the same time. And the World Economic Forum is very public in its aims in this. They've held multiple sessions on disinformation and malinformation and how can we combat this sort of thing on the internet. This is a major focus of the World Economic Forum. And even the United Nations publicly admitting that they control Google search results. They admitted this. We have their audio. In fact, we have their audio admitting that they worked with Google to suppress climate results that they didn't want and certain search results that they didn't want. Jacinda Ardern, formerly of New Zealand, now in charge of this mal and disinformation policy plan, basically for the World Economic Forum. And heck, she spoke about it in front of the UN last week. While the rest of the world is focused on Ukraine and what's going to happen there with World War III, she was very focused on disinformation and censorship and in front of the United Nations pushing for more censorship. I'm curious, what will happen with this registry, David? Like, as a podcast or independent media, you having to register with the Canadian government in order to do what? Like, if you run afoul of some certain guidelines, what will happen to you?
Well, doesn't this remind you of similar occurrences in fascist, communist, or Nazi countries where people were encouraged to sign up, register, do the good thing, and the state will appreciate that and applaud your honesty? Well, the reverse is always true. Once they have your name and they know how you're broadcasting and what you're broadcasting, once the censors have their eye on you, it'll be that much easier to come to your door, literally, as they did in the UK, and cart you away to jail. And I am not registering because I read the CRT news release, and the news release says I have to be making $10 million a year. So if anybody suggests I need to register by November 28th, I'm going to say, sorry, but this indicates I don't have to register. And I'm certainly not going to register, even if you force me to, because this is about non-compliance of an authoritarian, very dangerous government. And I think you'll see the response is going to be the same from all new media, all independent broadcasters in Canada. They're going to say, no way, I'm not getting on your registry, especially since you've given me this loophole in your news release that says I have to be making $10 million a year. No, I'm not going to read the fine print and say, I better be a good Canadian and register. That's exactly what Trudeau is hopeful of, that people are going to say, well, it's for the good of the country. And this will somehow benefit what? Government control in this country? Right. I don't know how you could possibly justify this as a good thing. But Justin Trudeau will try to find a way.
We'll get you out of here on this, David. What's been the mainstream media response in Canada to this, the coverage of this? Has it been plastered all over the CBC? Has it been front page news in the Toronto Sun? Has it really affected them at all in any kind of coverage?
Two different worlds. As I say, there's the coverage that I'm describing to you from the new media, from independent media. There's the coverage from the mainstream media, which is, don't worry. Don't get upset. Very few people are making $10 million. It will never affect you. This is not really a registry. Let's not call it a registry. That smacks of the gun registry. So there's definitely a propaganda element to all of the mainstream reporting, which I went through yesterday. And it's like they're reading the same talking points, just as they do about Ukraine. They're all reading from the same talking points from the government. And this, don't worry, folks. This is not going to mean more infringement on your free speech. This is good for you. This is good for you.
Take your sugar. Take your medicine. It's good for you. Just shut up and comply. Well, we do not comply on this show, and that's why we have David Clayton here from Canada to break it all down for us. And thank you for staying strong up there in Canada, keeping an eye on this Trudeau criminal regime up there. David, great to see you as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Clayton.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.